There's a buzz at the tiny Alexandria airport in central Louisiana. It's not often the Army brass graces this tarmac. Among them, a 4-star general, the Vice Chief of Staff of the US Army. But this is a special occasion. The soldiers of the Louisiana National Guard have finished their tour of duty in Iraq and are trickling home. Home to a state devastated by Hurricane Katrina.
Welcome home.
The 256th Infantry Brigade, 35 of its soldiers killed in Iraq, leaving one scene of devastation for another.
In fact, we're going to make our city right, and the state of Louisiana. Ladies and gentlemen, today we gather to recognize and honor members of the 256 Brigade Combat Team. Please join us in a round of applause for these fine soldiers.
These soldiers belong to a unique American institution, the National Guard. Civilians who don military uniform to defend the homeland from flood, fire, disaster and civil disruption. But now they're expected to spend lengthy tours fighting on foreign soil too. They're police officers, teachers, nurses, accountants, electricians, part-time soldiers asked to put their lives on hold to defend the nation full-time. Now, hundreds in this brigade have lost everything.
Yeah, we all been affected by the hurricane some, but we're just going to go home, pick up the pieces the best way we can, and move on as a family.
It's traumatic, but the family's okay, so it's just good to be back.
It must have been agony for some of those guys.
It was very agonizing. It was very tough. It was long nights. It was, it was a hard closure to a hard tour of duty.
First Sergeant Darrell Graf considers himself one of the lucky ones. He'd moved from Louisiana to Mississippi a couple of years ago. Home and family were out of the hurricane's path. But not so his men.
You have this anticipation for the day that you're going home. You have this buildup of emotion that begin to really transform the unit at the very end. And as they're getting ready to be proud of what they've done, to be happy that they're going home, to be thankful for what they have, to summarize the lessons that they learned, you have a hurricane destroy their community, their city, their homes, and their families. And it's like an instant eraser board just wiped everything away. Everything that they've anticipated is gone. Every bit of joy they felt is gone. And now it's just a somber kind of quiet.
These civilians signed up with the Guard for 1 weekend a month or 1 month a year. Until 4 years ago, they weren't even considered real soldiers by their professional comrades, lacking in training and given hand-me-down equipment from the Army. Before September the 11th, it was argued the Guard should be taken out of foreign service and kept purely for homeland defence. But the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq have stretched the US Army to the limit. Expanding the Army would be costly and politically unpopular for the Bush administration. It's opted instead for a call-out of the National Guard.
We've always said we're one Army. I think since 9/11 we have proven it. We have 7 National Guard brigades and thousands of the United States Army reservists serving shoulder to shoulder with the active component. When you bring the reserve component of this nation to war, you bring America to war.
Baby combat bear.
Baby combat bear.
So who's this one?
Darrell Graf got out of the Army 12 years ago, but then enlisted with the National Guard, partly to pay for a college education. As his civilian career in engineering and marketing took off, he decided he'd served long enough.
I made a decision to leave. However, as duty-bound and to my men, I didn't want to leave them just out in the cold. So I re-enlisted for 6 months, which was not always possible, but just for 6 months to train my replacement.
Desperate to keep its veterans, the National Guard invoked what's called a stop-loss order. In short, blocking any resignations. Darrell Graf had just 1 month left to serve when his unit was sent to Iraq. Did you have any idea that when you were about to re-enlist that you would find yourself in Iraq?
No.
He didn't even believe it was true even after he got the phone call. He really believed he could get out. He thought there was a way that he could manage to get out.
It really wasn't a ramp up. It was like a dragster with his wheels spinning, and it just took off.
2 weeks later, he was gone. I mean, that was it. We had no grasp of the concept at all. I mean, it was, okay, he's leaving, and that's that.
He left his wife in Mississippi for nearly 2 years with 2 children, the youngest still a baby.
The oldest one was probably the most difficult. She had the most difficult time. You never would assume that a 4 or 5-year-old would struggle with the same emotions that an adult would have, but this child did. She did, and I know that there's tons more children that did. It's very, very difficult to see your babies struggle. It's very hard. And I mean, I wrote the president, I talked to the Pentagon. I mean, I went through every single channel I could to let them know that, you know what, we have something to say here, and we are people that are being left behind. You know, I mean, that's a long time to go without your husband.
The hardest part for me was the guilt. It was my fault. It was my fault that I re-enlisted. It was my fault that I was deployed. It was my fault that my family was going through the separation, the pains, the many things that she doesn't talk about.
So this is Lauren's room?
Yes, this is Lauren's room. Every night before bed, I would tuck her in, have her kiss her dad, good night, and then lay her down.
To miss so much is the only thing that you find is that one little negative, bitter pocket that you say you can't get back. Because, yes, my daughter's first words to me were over the phone, and she wasn't talking to me. She simply said, "Mama, shoes." And you will all never forget that statement. It's what it is. It was hard, and it still brings back hard emotions. Because you can't replace that time.
There are emotional and economic strains. When on active duty, guardsmen are paid, but there's no compensation for businesses and careers abandoned for more than a year. Darrell Graf says he can rebuild his depleted client base. Others are not so lucky.
There's many families that didn't make it, many families that divorced. There'll be a certain percentage of soldiers that have no home, have no job, their business is gone, their employer is gone, they have nothing left to go to.
The Guard is supposed to be a backup. I regret that this administration did not do a better job of analyzing the long-term needs in Iraq so that we could know how many active duty forces we needed instead of going to the Guard and Reserve.
Republican Congressman Walter Jones sits on the House Armed Services Committee, is a former National Guardsman himself, and has Army and Air National Guard units in his state of North Carolina. In a split with his Republican president, the congressman says the US cannot sustain its use of the troops, especially the Guard, who now account for nearly half of all US forces in Iraq.
Jill, I don't think we can afford to be there 2 or 3 more years with 130,000 American troops. If you do, I'm afraid somebody's going to have to start the debate in the Congress about the draft.
Could you have ever imagined that your people would have made up 50%, half the component, in a war zone?
No one in the world ever imagined that.
National Guard Chief Lieutenant General Stephen Blum spoke to foreign correspondent before Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast. Already there were fears the demands of Iraq were pushing the Guard beyond their limits.
We are being stretched, there's no question about that. Probably using the National Guard in particular at an unprecedented rate in modern history. But we're far from broken. There's lots of elasticity. We have a lot of stretch left.
He warned then they were coping, But there was a serious shortage of funds and basic equipment, such as trucks and radios, to serve on the home front.
It is in the billions of dollars just for the equipment piece. You have to remember that the National Guard was under-equipped before the war started. That has not improved the equipment condition or the quantity or the quality of the equipment that's still remaining here in the United States, so that the Guard can discharge its responsibilities and duties if the governor should call on them for homeland defense and support the homeland security.
Somebody to come into the city and help us. We need the National Guard. Mr. Bush, please send somebody down here to help us.
I want to go home. I haven't seen my mom.
When the hurricane struck, it was the National Guard to whom everyone turned.
Get our guys.
But in the two states hardest hit, half the National Guard of Louisiana was sitting in Iraq, as was 40% of the Guard from neighbouring Mississippi. More than 40,000 other troops were pulled in, the biggest disaster response in Guard history. But only a third of the Guard's equipment was available for use in the US. Most of it, including the best of their communications equipment, is in Iraq.
I need 6 lines. 1 here, 1 there. Straight on across.
One senior officer told us another disaster now would take the Guard to breaking point.
We've got so many problems in this country, especially since Katrina. I've got another hurricane coming at the time of this interview. This is one of those seasons I'm afraid it's going to be hurricane after hurricane, and you know the season goes until the end of November. And the states need the Guard to help.
I never thought I'd see this day. The day where we're actually driving through a U.S. city with weapons, providing security missions. I just never thought I'd ever see this day.
Lieutenant Antoine Brooks is a platoon leader with this National Guard military police unit brought in from California. In civilian life, he's trying to run a medical database business, an enterprise he'd put on hold until his return from a year in Iraq. Now he's back in uniform, more than 3,000 kilometres from home.
Our mission is to provide security for the search and rescue teams, generally to protect them from any hostile encounters that they may have, i.e. people that think they mistake them for looters or any other problems that they may have had, as well as animals that may decide that they're hungry and they're going to attempt to make a meal out of one of us.
Open door! U.S. Army, anybody here? We're here to help.
Officially under the command of the state governors, the National Guard is the only branch of the military legally allowed to carry out law enforcement on US soil.
Clear. Clear.
When local police forces disintegrated under the strain of the disaster, only the Guard had the authority to back them up and impose order.
Somebody needs to check this house over here.
California didn't have an intact MP unit to send. This one was cobbled together with MPs pulled in from around the state.
Your ID, sir. What do you need ID? Well, because there's some folks who've stolen some New Orleans Police Department uniforms in a squad car. You need to check everybody. It's my orders.
I ain't got time.
Sorry?
I'm going on, okay?
You need to stop, sir.
No.
You need to stop your vehicle, sir.
Southerners are asking why they had to wait for reinforcements from the other side of the country before order was restored. In Richland, Mississippi, the parents of 2 guardsmen say their sons should have been here to help.
Why aren't my sons here to be able to go down and help these fellow Mississippians? Why are they in Iraq? They should be here in Mississippi, because this is what a National Guard unit should be doing.
Josh and Paul Ammerman were born together and now serve together in the same National Guard unit in Iraq. Their mother says the twins wanted to be home helping after the hurricane with the local knowledge and urgency that only Mississippians could give.
Most of them would have been to Biloxi and would have been to Gulfport and would have known the streets and would have known Gulfport people, would have had family there that they would have very much cared about. And, they would have been able to do probably a better job, than a Guard unit from another state would have been able to do.
The Ammermans have 4 sons. Like many parents, they encouraged their youngest, the twins, to join the National Guard. It would help pay for their college tuition and provide structure in their lives.
We are children of Vietnam era, and in Vietnam, people joined the National Guard so that they wouldn't be deployed to a foreign soil. So, no, we didn't consider it. We thought of a National Guard as a National Guard, as someone who protects inside the nation, as a militia, citizen soldiers. And we didn't think of that they would be deployed overseas.
Filmed here at their base, the Ammerman twins are not only in Iraq, but have one of the most dangerous of jobs, personal bodyguards for their commander in an area near Baghdad known as the Triangle of Death. Their path often littered with IEDs, improvised explosive devices.
2 trucks got hit today by IEDs. I don't know if I can say that, but...
And, we go on these missions, when we're convoying. I mean, we're lucky, knock on wood, we haven't been hit by an IED yet, but there's no telling how many times we've been stopped on the supply routes and stuff by IEDs,
Priscilla Ammerman has requested her sons not be sent on missions together.
You can't have brothers running the same missions. It's not possible. For one, I mean, if you come into contact, there's the possibility that you'll lose both of them. But 2, if you got brothers running in the same convoy and one of them gets hurt, the other one's not going to be able to perform.
It's a well-founded fear. Unlike the regular army, National Guard units comprise soldiers from the one state. When a helicopter is shot down or a truck blown up, the tragedy can shatter a whole community.
It's just way more than anybody signed up for the National Guard. For as little benefits and as little pay as a National Guard soldier gets, it's just the being activated for this amount of times is just not what they signed up for.
It's a price too high for many. As soon as they can, the Ammerman brothers will join the steady stream of Guardsmen and women leaving the service. The Bush administration is now attempting to stem the flow from the 430,000-strong Guard by offering its part-time soldiers cash incentives. Enlistment bonuses of up to $10,000 for new recruits, up to $15,000 for a soldier who re-enlists. But still the numbers are falling and recruitment grows more difficult.
Move on to the next street.
While he was over in Iraq, I think it was in January, they wanted them to re-enlist. They gave them signing bonuses and different things to, I guess, more or less tell them, hey, you can sign on, stay with the military, we need you. And they were dangling, I felt they were dangling that over the soldier's head right at a time that wasn't really appropriate. That scared me to death, knowing that people were taking money over their husband, or their sons. I told my husband, I said, I will work 3 jobs if I have to. I don't need that. We don't need any of that.
I talked to neighbors who I would never expect of having any criticism of Bush's policies, saying that, they just need to bring these soldiers home. It's time for them to come home.
If the president sees fit and starts downsizing today, it would be great with me.
He's just spent nearly 2 years away from home, but after 4 short days of leave, Sergeant Darrell Graf is back in uniform, reporting for duty. His fellow guardsmen, like him, have a choice to make, to stay in or leave.
For me, was it a high price? I can't say that it was completely. For my family, you bet. You bet. We've got 2 little girls that they didn't ask for it.
He's getting out.
Of all my deployment, when I wasn't able to put my family first, this is a time for me to switch gears and put my family first.
I'm gonna get Daddy. That's in my hand.
Ladies and gentlemen,